as we mull over the idea of organizing, of fighting for better wages, one of the big threats is closure of stores.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
20 baristas have been fired, and a store has been closed permanently. And that's what I want to talk about next. Starbucks corporate has decided to close a store in Ithaca, New York, in what can only be seen as a response to unionizing workers, it seems to me. But let's take a look at their official reason. Their official reasoning, they say, that they had to close the store is because a grease trap is broken. Which, if you've ever worked in a restaurant, that makes it very difficult to, for one, very important thing for a restaurant food service type thing, is it's very difficult with a broken grease trap to keep the store smelling nice.
And it's definitely a safety hazard.
It is
100%.
Definitely a safety hazard.
That's real, but I've also never been in a situation, and I've worked in restaurants that were much more food intensive than Starbucks. And even in those places, I don't see where a broken grease trap would necessitate the shutdown of the entire facility, even if it closed early for a day to get it fixed. Like, that's
Exactly.
it. That's the extent of this. This isn't, oh, God, this just right off the whole store. It's closed forever because of a grease trap. Really?
Workers report that this grease trap has been broken for years. For years.
Hence their concern, right? That's a valid concern.
Right. And the workers actually went on a one-day strike to attempt to get corporate to fix it, because they've been having to deal, corporate hasn't been having to deal with this broken grease trap, customer complaints, the safety issues that are associated with that. They haven't been having to deal with that. The workers have been having to deal with that. And the workers want the issue resolved. So they went on a one-day strike to try to bring corporate attention to this. And now corporate is saying, no, we have to close this location because of the grease trap. We don't think that we can provide the service. Like, you just fix it. You can literally just fix it. And of course, this is silly, especially when you consider the fact that, according to a local news outlet, this location sits on one of the busiest corners in town. It's also silly when you couple something else that Schultz said in his New York Times fellatio. He said that he talked about opening a Starbucks in a lower income neighborhood, saying, quote, "I don't know if it'll be profitable, but it doesn't matter because we want to provide a third place," or whatever. We want to provide for the community. That's total nonsense. Like, what a liar. What a dirty, weaselly, sniveling liar. I mean, it's insane. So the reason is obviously because of retaliation. And that brings up the question, how can we do something about this? How can workers do something about this at Starbucks and out of Starbucks? And I think the first thing is that the Starbucks workers have to keep organizing. They have to keep on, because the more stores that you organize, the more power that you have. And eventually you can reach a density where, whether billionaire Howie wants to or not, he has to pay attention and do what you need him to do.
Right, and keep pressure on the National Labor Relations Board.
Yes.
As we've talked about on this show, they have been a pleasant surprise, one of the few pleasant surprises of the Biden administration. And so I know in their statement, Starbucks Workers United, their attorney, in the statement I saw, he seemed pretty confident that the NLRB was going to intervene here and rule on their behalf. And I would be inclined to think so as well if they're actually following the law, because it is against the law to shut down a facility in retaliation for unionizing.
Right.
But as we also talk about on this show, we can't just leave it in the hands of lawyers and government agencies to do our work.
Right. Exactly. And so, and this is what has happened with the big three automakers. Density got to such a point where they were at first reluctant to recognize any union, to bargain with any union. And it got to such a point where, there were so many people that are necessary to bring the profits in to these big automakers that they had to bargain with the union, and they had to give them a lot of the things that they were asking for. So you start to get to a place where you've got 30% of workers at Starbucks across the country unionized, 40%, 50%. 80%, 90%. totally different ballgame. And his ability to do stuff like this is going to be completely different. And on top of the fact that he's closing it, they were only given a week notice, and they were not given transferal rights. They were given the ability to apply to another Starbucks location.
Well, hell, I've got that. I've got the ability to apply.
But even if you had transferal rights, a lot of the people there are college students who don't have cars. They're college students nearby who don't have cars, so they can't go to the next nearest location because they don't have transportation to get there. So, the ability that Starbucks would have to unilaterally make a decision like this, if they have to deal with a national high-density Starbucks union, would be greatly, greatly diminished. So that is the first, best, and most effective way to move forward. But there's also, another way is like Adam said, state action through the NLRB, keeping pressure on the NLRB, and there are other interesting policy proposals out there, and one of them that I want to talk about is the right of first refusal, which is something that a policy that Adam and I have been interested in and have wanted to talk about for a while, which is that it's a policy proposal that Jeremy Corbyn put in his Labour Party plan in the UK, which is the outlines.
Now that was a few years ago.
Several years ago.
Just to clarify, Jeremy Corbyn is no longer in charge of the Labour Party over there because the right-wing British media and the awful libs inside the corporate wing of the Labour Party helped take him down. Anyway. Sorry to get off on that, but we still love you, Jeremy.
Yes.
You should have been Prime Minister.
Should have been Prime Minister. And Bhaskar Sankara is in Denmark, I think it is now, with Jeremy Corbyn. And Corbyn was he had to take a cab, and the cab driver was Palestinian. And when it came time for him to get off, the cab driver refused any fare, and he was like, "I'll take you anywhere," or something. That was
nice.
That was pretty cool, yeah. But yeah, so the right of first refusal is a really interesting policy proposal, and I think it makes a lot of sense from any sort of political persuasion that you may be of. I think the right of first refusal is a policy that makes good economical and moral sense. And what it is, it's just a policy that would say that you cannot, as the owner of a company, sell or close or take your business into bankruptcy without first giving the workers the right of first refusal, without first offering them at fair market value the business to take over themselves, to run themselves. And I think this is just the most, even as a conservative, what could possibly be the argument against this? What could possibly be the argument against giving, because it's not saying that workers have to take it over. If they don't want to, they can just refuse. That's the first right of first refusal. They can have the first refusal. If they don't want it, then somebody else can buy it. They can take it into bankruptcy. They can close it, whatever. If the workers don't want it, then they don't want it. But if they do want it, if the workers do want it, if the people who have run the company actually done the thing, if they would like the opportunity to run it themselves, why should a capitalist have the right to give it to somebody else just because they have the money? Because the workers could get the money. The workers could pay him what anybody else would pay him at fair market value.
And think about the way that can impact our community. If you have a facility that's slated to be closed and you have workers who live in these neighborhoods, pay taxes in these neighborhoods, send their kids to the local schools, they're part of the local churches, and on, and these workers have the ability to purchase the facility themselves, to keep it operational, and to move forward in whatever manner they choose,
right,
but in a way that keeps those people employed and keeps the money there in your own community locally. That really is such a no-brainer in my mind, and
it is.
Ever since I first learned about this years ago, it's just been one of those things that seems so common sense. It's like so common sense. it's too common sense, and that's why it's not part of our discourse.
Right. And the, the incentivization of worker cooperatives as a way to organize production is very good because there are a lot of benefits to worker-owned enterprises. They have obviously, they're better to the workers because the workers own them. They tend to have higher wages, better benefits, and things like this. There tends to be more stability because there is more of an interest in actually taking care of the workers during scenarios like an inflation or something. So in a scenario like an inflation, a hierarchical business with a capitalist owner at the top interested in maximizing profits will, generally speaking, fire a bunch of people and there'll be layoffs. Whereas a worker-owned enterprise, there will be more of an interest in potentially tightening belts for the greater good, everybody tightening their belts a little so that everybody can keep their job.
Right. And you don't have a layer of management people at the top making obscenely more than the rank and file employees. Right. So that's a huge amount of the company's resources that are tied up in most companies that you're not going to see in a worker-owned enterprise.
And one of the reasons that we don't see very many worker-owned enterprises is that workers don't have the capital. And so the workers don't have the money to start a business or to buy a business. And we certainly
don't have the legal framework and the policy proposals out there to incentivize this. And even very capitalist countries in other places of the world, like Italy, for example. Italy's a capitalist country. They have probably a better welfare state than we do in some respects, but I mean, you can't argue. By no means is that a state-owned economy or a workers-owned economy. But in places like Italy, they do have laws and policies in place to facilitate these kinds of businesses.
And one of the ways that you could facilitate, in addition to giving workers the first right of refusal, which is something that Jeremy Corbyn in the UK wanted to do, and he also wanted to do this, is to offer state-backed loans to the workers' organization that they would form to buy the business, to offer them loans from the state, which... Instead of, because banks are much more hesitant to give business loans to workers than they are to capitalists, and so you could do that through the state. You could have lower interest rates or no interest rate potentially to try to incentivize this choice and give workers something that capitalists and owners and people that are free market weirdos, they say, oh, choice, I want choice, I want the market, the competition, whatever. And this would actually give workers a real choice about how they want to organize their production, how they want to organize their lives, how they want to organize their workplaces. And it would take, because one of the an enormous threat hanging over the heads of working people as we mull over the idea of organizing, of fighting for better wages, better working conditions, more time off the job, more protections. One of the big threats is closure of stores, of closure of businesses. That the biggest threat that the capitalist has is to just pick up his ball and walk home. And this would take that threat away, because if he wants to take his ball and go home, he can walk away. We can give him a fair market value for the business, and we can run it ourselves.
Something that this makes me consider is that, to kind of touch on the point you mentioned to me earlier off air about the labor movement and the amount of resources they have now, despite having historically low membership, they have historically high resources.
Right.
I think there's an opportunity here for the labor movement and, more official uniondom to work with and on behalf of a workers' co-op movement. I think there could be a lot more synergy there. I could see labor unions pulling resources to help facilitate these kinds of enterprises. Mm-hmm. Really, I think that has to be something that's on the agenda for all of us that are, of this persuasion, because we have to find ways to concentrate power in our hands. to me, it's always about power. And how, what better way to gain power than to actually control and own production in your own community?
Yes.
So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening out there. Co-ops and worker-owned enterprises is not my expertise, but it's something I'm really interested in, something I'm always trying to learn more about. And I know there's a lot of cool stuff happening in Jackson, Mississippi, less so than it could have been. There's been some really interesting things happening out in Richmond, California, of course, out in Spain. So there are real world examples that are already out there on how to do these things, policies and laws that can be put in place to facilitate it and to improve it. And I think that's something, and maybe we'll hear a little bit of this at Labor Notes next week. I'd like to hear more from labor unions and union people talking with co-op and worker-owned enterprise people and how we can more work together to grow both.
Right.
Because I think it takes both, and I think we got to approach it from both angles. Because, wouldn't it be nice if if our entire economy was either worker-owned enterprises and worker-owned co-ops or fully unionized industries? Mm-hmm. Right? I think that's the sort of transitional goal that we can really be working towards.
And I think that is the ultimate goal is worker-owned enterprises, is that we don't have bosses, is that we run enterprises ourselves. And we, that's the historic
in the
mission
meantime,
of labor.
like this unionize, build power in those workplaces. And then, yes, ultimately this start owning the industries themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that is a pathway for shared prosperity and a pathway for democracy. And that's something Richard Wolff talks a lot about in terms of democracy. And, he typically doesn't use, like, socialism as a label, but focuses more on, economic democracy. Mm-hmm. Because it's true, for 8 hours a day or more, we report to a dictatorship.
Right.
And there is another way.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.